The chamber was massive, built to hold representatives from 200 different species. Day-One stood alone in the center, his dark suit looking plain compared to the colorful scales, feathers, and strange skin of the aliens around him. Above him, the council members sat in their high seats, looking down at the single human with expressions that ranged from disgust to satisfaction. Hana watched from the viewing gallery, her hands gripping the rail until her knuckles turned white. She had worked as Day-One's aide for 5 years, and she had never seen the council chamber this full. Every seat was taken. Every species had sent someone to witness this moment. The chief counselor raised 3 of his forearms. The chamber fell silent. "We have voted," his voice boomed through the translation devices everyone wore. "The matter of humanity and Earth has been decided." The vote is unanimous. Day-One's face showed nothing. He had expected this. They all had, really. Humanity had pushed too hard, expanded too fast, asked too many questions that made the older species uncomfortable. But hearing it said out loud still felt like a weight dropping on his chest. Earth and all human colonies are hereby expelled from council space. You have 1 standard year to move all your people, ships, and stations beyond the frontier rim. Any human presence remaining after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others made sounds that the translators couldn't interpret but sounded like approval. A few sat in silence, looking uncomfortable with what had just happened. Day-One bowed slightly the way he had been taught. "The people of Earth hear the council's decision. We will comply." That seemed to surprise some of them. Maybe they expected him to argue or beg. Humans had a reputation for being stubborn and emotional. But Day-One simply turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the enormous room. Hana met him at the door. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. "Not yet, sir. What do we do now?" she asked quietly. "We go home," Day-One said, "and we tell them what happened." The journey back to Earth took 3 days through the official transit gates. The ship was quiet. The small human crew didn't talk much. They all knew their lives were about to change forever. Some of them had been born on council worlds, had never even seen Earth. Now they would be forced to leave everything behind. Day-One spent most of the trip in his cabin, writing his report. He chose each word carefully. This document would be read by billions of people. It needed to be clear, honest, and it needed to not cause panic. But when Earth finally appeared in the view screen, blue and white and beautiful, he deleted everything he had written. The truth was simple enough. They had been kicked out. They had 1 year to leave. The rest would work itself out. The landing at Geneva was quiet. No crowds, no media. The government had kept the vote secret until Day-One could return. He went straight from the spaceport to the Global Council building, where President Soman was waiting with her cabinet. Soman was younger than Day-One, barely 50, but she had led Earth through some of its hardest years. She looked tired now, sitting at the head of the long table. "Tell me everything," she said, Day-One told her. "The vote, the timeline, the threats." When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Soman did something unexpected. She smiled. "Well," she said, "I suppose it's time to tell you all the truth." She pressed a button on her desk. The wall behind her lit up with a star map. But it wasn't any map Day-One had seen before. It showed regions far beyond council space marked with human symbols and dates. "Project Exodus," Soman said. "We've been planning for this for 7 years." Day-One felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "What?" "Our intelligence services predicted this outcome years ago," Soman explained. "The council was always going to expel us. We're too different, too aggressive in our expansion, too willing to question their authority. So we started preparing." Another button. The map changed, showing ship designs, resource caches, colony sites. "Admiral Taman has been overseeing the construction of 300 colony ships in secret locations. We've been surveying regions beyond the rim using stealth probes. We've identified 47 potentially habitable worlds. We've been stockpiling resources, training colonists, building infrastructure that can be quickly dismantled and transported." Hana, standing beside Day-One, whispered, "How did you keep this secret?" "Not easily," Soman admitted. "But we compartmentalized everything. Most people working on Project Exodus didn't know what they were really building. The council was watching us, yes, but they were looking for military buildups, weapons development. They weren't looking for colony ships disguised as commercial vessels." Day-One sat down heavily. His mind was racing. "So we're actually ready to leave?" More than ready, Soman said. We're eager. Do you know what the Council's biggest mistake was? They gave us restrictions, limits on how fast we could expand, rules about which technologies we could develop, quotas on resource extraction. They did it to keep us under control to make sure we didn't grow too powerful. She leaned forward, and her eyes were bright with something Daewon realized was excitement. But out beyond the rim, there are no restrictions, no rules, no quotas, just empty space waiting for someone bold enough to claim it. The Council just gave us permission to do what we've always done best, grow without limits. Over the next few days, the truth about Project Exodus spread through the government and then to the public. The reaction was mixed. Some people were angry they had been kept in the dark. Others were relieved that someone had been planning ahead. Many were simply stunned at the scale of what had been prepared. Daewon met with Admiral Taemin at a military base in Korea. The admiral was an old man now, almost 70, but his eyes were sharp and his voice was strong. I knew you'd be surprised, Taemin said, pouring them both tea. But someone had to think past tomorrow. The Council has been around for 10,000 years. They think in centuries. We needed to start thinking the same way. Why didn't you tell me? Daewon asked. I've been negotiating with the Council for a decade. I could have used this information. No, Taemin said firmly. You needed to be genuinely trying to keep us in the Council. If you had known we were preparing to leave, they would have seen it in your face, heard it in your voice. You had to believe we wanted to stay, so they would believe it too. Daewon wanted to be angry, but he couldn't. The old admiral was right. So what happens now? He asked. Now? Taemin smiled. Now we show the galaxy what humans can really do when no one is holding us back. We have 1 year to leave Council space, but I think we can do it in 6 months. And then the real work begins. That night, Daewon stood on his apartment balcony looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there beyond what anyone could see was humanity's future. Not the future they had expected, not the one they had wanted, but maybe the one they needed. The galaxy had voted to banish Earth. They thought they were getting rid of a problem. But Daewon was beginning to think they had just made their biggest mistake. They hadn't destroyed humanity's ambitions. They had simply removed all the obstacles in its way. He smiled and went inside. There was work to do. Captain Jiwon stood on the bridge of the UES Vanguard, watching the construction crews make their final checks. The ship was enormous, big enough to carry 10,000 people, and everything they would need to start a new colony. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary heavy cargo vessel. From the inside, it was a miracle of engineering. Status report, she said to her first officer. All systems green, Captain. We're ready to depart on your order. Jiwon nodded. She had been captain of the Vanguard for 3 years, but most people didn't know the ship existed. It had been built in pieces in different shipyards across the solar system, then assembled in the dark space beyond Neptune where Council satellites couldn't see. She and her crew had been training for this mission since the beginning, knowing that one day they would leave Earth and never come back. That day had finally come. She looked at the crew around her, young faces mostly, people who had volunteered to be colonists, who wanted to see new worlds. They looked nervous but determined. Good. They would need both emotions in the months ahead. Take us out, Jiwon ordered, nice and slow. We're just another cargo ship heading for the outer colonies. Nothing to see here. The Vanguard began to move, its massive engines pushing it away from the construction station. Around them, dozens of other ships were doing the same thing. The exodus had begun. Down on Earth, Admiral Taemin watched the departures on a dozen screens. Each one showed a different ship, a different crew, heading toward a different destination. Some were going to existing human colonies to help organize evacuations. Others were heading straight out toward the rim, scouting ahead for the best routes. A younger officer approached him. Admiral, we have a problem. The Council has placed observers at all the major transit gates. They're counting every ship that leaves. Let them count, Taemin said calmly. They're looking for military vessels. They're worried we might start a war. They're not paying attention to cargo ships and colony transports. But sir, if they realize how many ships we have, they won't. We've been registering these ships under different names for years. Civilian companies, private corporations, even dummy organizations that exist only on paper. The Council sees hundreds of individual ships. They don't see the fleet. The officer still looked worried, but he nodded and returned to his station. Taemin allowed himself a small smile. The Council thought they understood humans. They thought they knew how humans operated. But they had made a critical error. They had studied humanity's governments, its military, its official organizations. They hadn't looked at its private sector, its corporations, its tendency to build things independently of government control. Half the ships in Project Exodus weren't even military. They belonged to companies that had been quietly convinced to participate. Some saw it as a business opportunity. Others genuinely believed in humanity's right to expand. A few just didn't like being told what to do by aliens. The reasons didn't matter. The result was the same. A fleet large enough to evacuate billions hidden in plain sight. President Soman addressed the world that evening. The broadcast went to every screen on Earth and every human colony. "My fellow humans," she began. "By now you all know about the Council's decision. We have been expelled from Council space. We have 1 year to leave. I want to tell you that we are not running away. We are moving forward." She paused, letting that sink in. "For 7 years we have been preparing for this moment. We knew it was coming. We built ships, surveyed new territories, and planned for our future. A future without restrictions, without limits, without asking permission from species that fear our potential." Ji-won watched the speech from her captain's chair. Around her the crew was silent, listening. "The Council sees us as a problem to be removed," Soman continued. "They see our ambition as dangerous, our growth as threatening. But I ask you, what is wrong with ambition? What is wrong with wanting to grow, to explore, to build something better for our children? Nothing. There is nothing wrong with being human." The crew cheered at that. Ji-won felt it too, a surge of pride in her chest. "So yes, we will leave. But we will not leave in shame. We will not scatter like refugees. We will leave as one people, united in purpose, and we will show the galaxy what humanity can achieve when we are finally free to reach our full potential. The vote to banish us will be remembered not as our defeat, but as the moment humanity truly began." When the speech ended, the bridge was quiet for a moment. Then the communications officer spoke up. "Captain, we're receiving departure clearances from command. All ships are green for Phase 1. Phase 1, Ji-won repeated. "Acknowledged. Helm set course for the Kepler sector. Best speed." The Vanguard jumped to faster-than-light travel, and the stars stretched into lines of light. Over the next few weeks, humanity began the largest migration in its history. Millions of people packed their belongings and said goodbye to homes they had lived in for generations. Entire orbital stations were carefully dismantled, their parts labeled and stored for reassembly at new locations. Mining operations in the asteroid belt worked overtime, extracting every last resource they could before abandoning the sites. Ji-won's ship reached its destination first, a region of space 3 sectors beyond the rim. The charts called it the Outer Dark, marked as unsurveyed and potentially hazardous. But humanity's secret probes had already mapped it thoroughly. It was far from hazardous. It was perfect. "Captain, sensors are picking up the marker beacon," the science officer reported. "The advanced team is already here." On the view screen, a small station appeared. It was basic, barely more than a few habitat modules connected together, but it was humanity's first permanent structure beyond Council space. A flag floated outside, Earth's blue and white colors bright against the darkness. "Take us in," Ji-won ordered. "Let's see our new home." As the Vanguard approached, more ships began to arrive. They came in groups of 5 or 10, spreading out across the sector. Each one carried colonists, equipment, supplies. Within days, there were 50 ships. Within weeks, 200 back on Earth. Admiral Taman received reports from every sector. The evacuation was ahead of schedule. The Council had expected chaos, delays, maybe even panic. Instead, they were seeing the most organized mass migration in galactic history. Human efficiency was on full display, and it was making the Council nervous. "They're asking questions," one of Taman's intelligence officers reported. "They want to know how we're moving so many people so quickly. They're starting to wonder if we planned this." "Of course we planned it," Taman said. "Tell them the truth. Humans are excellent at logistics. We've been moving large populations since ancient times. This is just bigger." "They're not satisfied with that answer, sir. They don't need to be satisfied. They need to let us leave in peace. As long as we're out of their space within the year, they have no grounds to interfere." The officer left and Taman returned to his screens. On one, he could see Ji-won's Vanguard, now anchored at the new station. On another, he saw the construction of New Earth, the planet they had chosen as their future capital. On a third, he saw supply convoys moving through the old asteroid fields harvesting the last resources. Everything was going according to plan. Better than planned, actually. At this rate, they would be completely out of council space in 6 months, not 12. And then the real work would begin. Taemin thought about the council sitting in their grand chamber congratulating themselves on removing the human problem. They had no idea what they had done. They had tried to cage humanity, and when that failed, they decided to throw them out completely. But you don't solve a problem by giving it more room to grow. You don't eliminate a threat by removing all the restrictions holding it back. The council had made a catastrophic mistake, and they wouldn't realize it until it was far too late. Taemin poured himself a drink and raised it toward the screens. To the future, he said quietly. To humanity unbound. Dr. Kyung stood at the observation window of the research vessel New Dawn, watching Earth shrink behind them. He had spent 40 years studying alien life, traveling to dozens of council worlds, learning about species that evolved under different suns. Now he was leaving it all behind, and he felt surprisingly calm about it. Doctor, his assistant, a young woman named Rena, approached with a tablet. The specimen storage is secured. All the samples survived the launch. Good, Kyung said. We'll need them. Who knows what we'll find out there? Rena looked at Earth's dwindling image. Do you think we'll ever come back? Maybe, someday, but not for a long time. He turned away from the window. Come on, let's get the lab set up properly. We have a lot of work ahead. The New Dawn was one of 50 research vessels in the Exodus fleet. While colony ships like Jiwon's Vanguard carried people and supplies, these ships carried humanity's scientific knowledge. Libraries, databases, research equipment, even living samples of Earth's plants and animals. Everything that made humanity what it was, preserved and carried forward. In orbit above Earth, the departure had become a constant flow of ships. Dozens left every hour, day and night. The council had stationed observers to watch the evacuation, and they were starting to realize something was wrong. Vexthar was a junior observer from the Koran species, assigned to count human ships and verify they were actually leaving. He had been doing this job for 2 months now, and the numbers weren't making sense. How many ships does Earth have? He asked his supervisor. The official registry lists approximately 1,500 vessels of significant size, the supervisor replied. Why? Because I've counted over 2,000 departures and they're still leaving. The supervisor's scales rippled, a sign of concern in Koran body language. That's not possible. Maybe you're counting some ships twice? I'm not, Vexthar insisted. I'm tracking transponder codes. Every ship is unique. The humans have more vessels than they reported. Then they must be civilian ships, private yachts, corporate vessels, things not on the military registry. Sir, some of these ships are huge. Colony ship huge. You don't build something like that without people noticing. The supervisor was quiet for a moment. Write a report. Send it to the council. Let them decide what it means. Vexthar wrote his report, but he didn't expect anyone to take it seriously. The council had decided humans were leaving, and that was the end of the matter. They didn't want to look too closely at how it was happening. Lieutenant Bora oversaw the dismantling of Earth's orbital defense network. The satellites had been there for decades, protecting Earth from asteroids and potential threats. Now they were being carefully taken apart piece by piece. Why are we saving all this? One of her team members asked. We could just blow them up and leave. Because every piece of metal, every computer chip, every solar panel has value, Bora explained. Out beyond the rim, we won't have easy access to manufacturing. Everything we can bring with us is something we don't have to build from scratch. The work was slow and careful. Each satellite was approached by a small crew in work suits, who would remove the valuable components and pack them into cargo containers. The rest was left as debris, scattered and harmless, but Bora's team wasn't just salvaging. They were also doing something else, something that wasn't in any official report. They were planting monitoring devices in the debris. Small passive sensors that would watch and listen for years after humans were gone. If the council decided to come after them, humanity would have warning. Smart, her second-in-command said when she explained it. Paranoid, but smart. It's not paranoid if they really are watching us, Bora replied. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out. Colonies were evacuated, but not before every useful piece of equipment was removed. Mining stations were abandoned but stripped clean first. Even agricultural stations had their soil carefully packed and preserved. Humanity was leaving nothing behind that could be used. Dr. Kyung watched the evacuation reports from his lab, The efficiency of it fascinated him. This was humanity at its best, organized and determined. But it also reminded him why the council had been afraid. "We're very good at this," he said to Rena. "Good at what? Leaving, moving, adapting. Most species stay on their homeworld for thousands of years before they venture into space. We went from living in caves to walking on the moon in a few thousand years. We spread across Earth like water, finding every crack and valley, and now we're doing it again, just on a bigger scale." "Is that why they kicked us out? Because we're too good at spreading?" Kyung nodded. "Partly, but also because we ask uncomfortable questions. The council has been in charge for 10,000 years. Their system works more or less. Then humans show up and start asking why things are done a certain way, whether there might be better methods, what the council is hiding in those restricted sectors. Are they hiding something? Probably. Most old governments do." He pulled up a star map on his screen. "But that's not our problem anymore. Let them keep their secrets. We'll make our own discoveries." The third month of the evacuation brought a new development. Several independent species, small ones not part of the council, started asking if they could join the human exodus. They were frontier species, living on the edges of council space, and they saw humanity's departure as an opportunity. President Soman met with their ambassadors via secured channels. They were a mixed group. Some wanted to escape council taxes and regulations. Others were simply curious about what lay beyond the rim. A few had been oppressed by council species and saw humanity as potential protectors. "We can't take everyone," one of Soman's advisors warned. "We have enough trouble moving our own people. But we can take some," Soman said. "Choose carefully. Species that bring useful skills, species that won't slow us down, and species that will remember we helped them when they needed it." In the end, 5 small species were granted permission to join the exodus. They brought their own ships, their own supplies, but they followed human fleet coordinates and agreed to settle in the Terran expanse under human leadership. Vexthar reported this to the council, and this time people paid attention. "The humans are forming alliances," one council member said. "With whom?" "Minor species. The Kelith, the Bryn, a few others. Nothing significant." "Nothing significant now," another councilor corrected. "But it sets a precedent. What if more species decide to leave council space? What if humans start building their own alliance out there? Then they would be someone else's problem," the chief councilor said firmly. "Our concern is removing them from our space. What they do beyond the rim is not our affair," but some council members looked worried. They were starting to realize that getting rid of the humans might not solve the problem. It might just move it somewhere they couldn't see it. By the end of the third month, Earth's orbit was almost empty. The constant stream of departing ships had slowed to a trickle. The planet below looked different too. Cities were darker with fewer lights at night. Not abandoned, but emptier. Most of humanity had already left. Dr. Kyung took one last look at Earth before the new dawn made its final jump to the expanse. He had been born there in a small city in Korea. He had watched the sunrise over mountains older than human civilization. Now he was leaving, probably forever. "You okay, Doctor?" Rena asked. "Yes," he said. "Just saying goodbye. Do you regret leaving?" Kyung thought about that. "No, this is what humans do. We move forward, always forward. The council thought they were punishing us, but they just gave us permission to do what we wanted anyway. No more rules, no more limits. Just empty space and infinite possibilities." He turned away from Earth and looked ahead, toward the unknown regions beyond the rim. "Come on," he said. "Let's go see what's out there." The new dawn jumped to light speed and Earth disappeared behind them. Ahead lay darkness, unexplored and unmapped. But somewhere in that darkness was humanity's future, and for the first time in a long time that future belonged only to them. Commander Minho adjusted his scanner and swept it across the ancient structure one more time. The readings were impossible, but they were consistent. The building in front of him was at least 50,000 years old, maybe older. That shouldn't exist. According to council history, this region of space had always been empty. "Commander, you need to see this," one of his team called from inside the structure. Minho climbed through the entrance, careful not to disturb anything. His team had been exploring this planet for 3 days now, and every discovery raised more questions. The planet was marked as uninhabitable on council charts, but it clearly wasn't. The atmosphere was breathable, the temperature comfortable, and there were ruins everywhere. Inside, his team member was standing in front of a wall covered in symbols. They glowed faintly in the dim light, pulsing with some internal power source that still worked after thousands of years. "What am I looking at?" Minho asked. "A star map, we think. See these patterns? They match known star positions, but from a very long time ago. And look here." She pointed to one area. "These symbols repeat. We think it's a language." Minho took pictures with his scanner. "Send everything to Dr. Yunji on the research ship. If anyone can figure this out, she can." The planet had been discovered by chance. The human fleet was spreading out across the expanse looking for suitable colony sites. This world had showed up on scanners as potentially habitable, so Minho's scout team had been sent to investigate. They expected to find an empty world, maybe some interesting geology. Instead, they found evidence of an entire civilization. Dr. Yunji received Minho's data aboard the research vessel Discovery. She was a specialist in ancient cultures, though most of her work had been on Earth's own history. She had never expected to find alien ruins, and certainly not ruins this old. She studied the symbols for hours, comparing them to every known language in the galactic database. Nothing matched. This wasn't any council species. This was something else entirely, something older. "How old?" her assistant asked. "Very old. Pre-council, definitely. Maybe even predating the oldest known civilizations." Yunji zoomed in on one cluster of symbols. "But look at this. The mathematical principles are similar to what we use. The star charts use the same reference points. Whoever built this thought like we do. Like humans, like scientists, like explorers, like people who wanted to understand the universe." She sat back. "We need more data. Tell Commander Minho to search for other sites. There has to be more than one building." Over the next few weeks, Minho's team found 12 more ruins on the same planet, and scout teams on other worlds reported similar findings. The expanse wasn't empty at all. It was full of remnants from a civilization that had once been everywhere and was now nowhere. Captain Jiwan's vanguard had settled into orbit around what would become New Earth. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. The atmosphere needed some adjustment, but nothing major. In a few years, it would be as comfortable as Earth itself. Below, the first colonists were already building. Prefabricated structures were being assembled into a city, growing larger every day. Fields were being planted with earth crops, carefully modified to grow in the local soil. It looked like any human colony, except there were no council inspectors watching, no regulations limiting how fast they could grow. "We'll have 10,000 people down there by next month," Jiwan's first officer reported. 20,000 the month after that. "At this rate, we'll have a full city in 6 months." "Good," Jiwan said. "What about the other colony sites?" "All proceeding on schedule. We have people on 5 planets now, with 3 more being surveyed. The mining operations in the asteroids are producing ahead of projections, and the shipyards are already under construction." Jiwan nodded. Shipyards, that was the key. They had brought ships from Council space, but they needed to build more. The expanse was enormous, and they had barely explored a fraction of it. More ships meant more colonies, more resources, more power. Dr. Yunji finally made a breakthrough with the ruins. She was working late in her lab when the translation algorithm suddenly clicked. The symbols weren't a language exactly. They were more like a mathematical code, designed to be understood by any species smart enough to find them. "It's a warning," she said to her empty lab. Then louder, "It's a warning!" She called an emergency meeting with the fleet commanders and President Soman, who was now aboard a mobile command ship in the expanse. "The precursors, as we're calling them, didn't disappear," Yunji explained. "They were destroyed, deliberately wiped out by the ancestors of the current council species." The room was silent. "How do you know?" Soman asked. Yunji displayed the translated texts. "They left records. Hidden records. Buried in structures designed to last forever. The precursors were technologically advanced, more so than the council is now. They had spread across this entire region of space, but the younger species feared them. They saw the precursors as a threat, so they formed an alliance and destroyed them completely. Every planet, every station, every ship. It took them centuries, but they were thorough." "And then what?" Admiral Taman asked. "Then they rewrote history. The council was built on the ruins of the precursor civilization. They took the precursors' technology, claimed it as their own, and made sure no one would ever know the truth. This region of space was marked as uninhabitable to prevent anyone from finding the evidence. Commander Minho spoke up from his scout ship. Why would they do that? What threat did the precursors pose? None, Yunji said. From what I can translate, the precursors were peaceful. They offered to share their technology, to help the younger species advance. But the younger species didn't want help. They wanted power. And the easiest way to take power from someone advanced is to destroy them before they realize you're a threat. The implications hung in the air like smoke. We need to be very careful with this information, Soman said finally. If the Council learns we've discovered the truth about the precursors, they might see us as a similar threat. They already see us as a threat, Taemin pointed out. That's why they expelled us. True, but there's a difference between being seen as annoying upstarts and being seen as a potential repeat of the species they genocided 50,000 years ago. So what do? Jiwon asked. We keep exploring. We keep learning. We use whatever precursor technology we can find and understand. But we don't advertise what we've found. Not yet. Soman looked around the table. And we make sure we're never in a position where the Council could do to us what they did to the precursors. We build strong. We build fast. We make sure that if they ever come for us, they'll regret it. The meeting ended, but the implications continued to spread through the human leadership. They weren't just building a new civilization. They were following in the footsteps of a murdered one. And the murderers were still in power, still ruling the galaxy, still afraid of anyone who might become too advanced. Commander Minho returned to the ruins with new purpose. His team started cataloging everything they could find, especially anything technological. Most of it was too damaged or too advanced to understand, but some pieces were salvageable. A power generation system here, a propulsion design there. Each one was carefully documented and sent back to human scientists. Dr. Yunji worked day and night translating more texts. The precursors had left behind a library of knowledge, hidden in ruins across dozens of worlds. Mathematics, physics, biology, philosophy. They had known so much and they had tried to preserve it even as they died. Why? Yunji asked herself. Why leave all this behind if you knew you were going to be destroyed? Then she found the answer, in a text that had been carefully carved into the walls of what must have been a temple or monument. We leave this for those who come after. We failed to see the threat until too late. We believed in peace and cooperation. We did not prepare for war. Learn from our mistake. The universe is not kind to the trusting. Be strong, be vigilant, and never let others decide your fate. Survive, and perhaps one day remember us. Yunji sat back feeling cold. The precursors had known they were dying. They had spent their last days leaving messages for whoever might find them thousands of years later. And now humans had found those messages, had read that warning. She forwarded the translation to President Salman with a single note attached. They were like us, curious, peaceful, ambitious. And it got them killed. We can't let that happen again. On New Earth, the first human city was growing rapidly. Buildings rose into the sky, streets filled with people. Ships landed and departed every hour. It looked like any human colony, but it felt different. There was an energy here, an excitement. No council regulations holding them back. No limits on what they could build or how fast they could grow. Jiwon walked through the streets during her off hours, watching the colonists work. They were building something new here, something that belonged only to humanity. And deep beneath the city, in secure facilities, scientists were already studying precursor technology, trying to unlock secrets that had been hidden for 50,000 years. The galaxy thought it had banished humanity to empty space. They had no idea they had sent humans to a treasure trove of ancient knowledge, to the last remnants of a civilization that had once been greater than anything the Council had ever achieved. And humanity, as always, was learning fast. 10 years had passed since humanity crossed the rim. Governor Hyun stood on the observation deck of New Earth's Capitol building, looking out over a city that had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as a few prefabricated structures was now a metropolis of 5 million people, with towers reaching into the clouds and ships filling the sky. Hard to believe this was empty plains a decade ago, his aide said beside him. Hyun nodded. We built this. No council approval, no regulations, no one telling us to slow down. Just humans doing what we do best. The numbers were staggering. New Earth wasn't even the largest colony anymore. 3 other planets had populations over 3 million. Dozens more had settlements of hundreds of thousands. The Terran expanse now contained almost 4 billion people, spread across 27 worlds and hundreds of stations. But it wasn't just the size that was impressive. It was the speed. Most council species took centuries to establish a successful colony. Humans had done it in years. The council's restriction on expansion hadn't just limited humanity's growth. It had hidden how fast humans could really move when nothing held them back. Engineer Wanchik was responsible for much of that speed. His team had been studying precursor technology for 8 years, slowly unlocking its secrets. The breakthrough had come 3 years ago when they finally understood the precursor's faster-than-light drive system. It's more efficient than anything the Council uses. Wanchik explained to a room full of military officers. Our ships can now travel twice as fast while using half the power. We can go places in weeks that would take Council ships months to reach. How did the precursors develop this? Admiral Taman asked. He was older now, almost 80, but still sharp. We're not entirely sure. The math is incredibly complex, but we think they understood space-time at a deeper level than we do. They weren't just traveling through space. They were bending it, folding it in ways we didn't think were possible. Can we replicate it? We already have. The first ship with the new drive system launched last month. We're calling it the Swift. It completed a journey that should have taken 2 months and just 3 weeks. Within a year, every new ship built in human shipyards included the improved drive. Older ships were retrofitted when possible. Suddenly, the expanse felt smaller. Human ships could reach any colony in days instead of weeks, and more importantly, they could explore deeper into unknown space than ever before. That exploration brought new discoveries almost daily. Commander Minho, now a captain in charge of an entire scout squadron, led missions into the deepest regions of the expanse. They found more precursor ruins, more technology, and occasionally something else. Captain, we're detecting a signal, his sensor officer reported. It's not human and it doesn't match any council frequencies. Minho studied the readout. The signal was weak but consistent, coming from a small moon orbiting a gas giant. Take us in slowly. Weapons ready but not armed. Let's not start a war by accident. As they approached, they found a small outpost. The beings inside were insectoid, about the size of humans, with 4 arms and compound eyes. Their ship was old, barely functional, and they seemed surprised to see anyone. We are the Kelith, their leader communicated through translation software. We did not expect to find anyone this far from Council space. The Kelith were one of the species that had joined the human exodus 10 years ago. This group had pushed even further out, looking for a place to build without interference. They had found this moon rich in minerals and had started a small mining operation. We thought we were alone out here, the Kelith leader said. We are pleased to see human friends. Minho reported the encounter and it sparked an idea. If the Kelith were exploring this deep, maybe other species were too. Maybe humanity wasn't the only group pushing beyond the rim. Over the next few years, human scouts encountered 17 other species in the deep expanse. Most were small groups, refugees or explorers from Council space. Some were independent species that had never joined the Council. A few were completely unknown, having evolved in regions the Council had never surveyed. President Soman, now in her 2nd decade leading the expanse, saw an opportunity. She invited representatives from these species to New Earth for what she called the Frontier Conference. We're all out here for the same reason, she told the assembled delegates. We want freedom. Freedom to grow, to explore, to build our own futures without someone else's rules. Humanity offers you partnership. Join the Terran Alliance. Keep your independence, your culture, your governments. But trade with us, share knowledge with us, and when threats come, we face them together. Not all the species agreed. Some were too isolationist, too distrustful. But many did. By the end of the conference, the Terran Alliance had grown from humanity alone to include 12 different species. It wasn't large by galactic standards, but it was growing. Back in Council space, this news was not welcome. Vexthar, who had spent the last decade monitoring human activity from a distance, compiled a detailed report for the Council. He had been promoted several times and he was now a senior analyst. The humans have not just survived their exile, his report read. They have thrived. Their population has doubled. Their territory has expanded to cover regions we thought were uninhabitable. They have formed alliances with multiple species, and their ships are now faster than ours using technology we don't understand. The Council debated what to do. Some wanted to send a military expedition to investigate. Others argued that as long as humans stayed beyond the rim, they weren't a Council problem. A few suggested reopening diplomatic relations. They're building an empire, one counselor argued. Right on our border. In another decade, they could rival us in strength. They're beyond the rim, another countered. We banished them there. We have no authority in that region. If we attack them, we become the aggressors. The debate continued for months with no resolution. The council was paralyzed by its own bureaucracy, unable to act decisively. Meanwhile, humanity kept growing. Engineer Wanchik's next breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Deep in the precursor ruins, Dr. Yunji had found references to something called a resource converter. The precursors had been able to transmute elements, changing common materials into rare ones. If humans could replicate that technology, they would never run short of resources. It's not quite alchemy, Wanchik explained to Governor Hyun. But it's close. We can't create matter from nothing, but we can rearrange atoms. Turn asteroid dust into steel, for example, or extract rare elements from common rock. How long until we can build one? We have a prototype working now. Small scale but functional. Give us 2 years, and we can have industrial-sized converters in every major colony. True to his word, within 2 years, resource converters were transforming the Expanse's economy. Colonies that had struggled with shortages of specific materials suddenly had abundance. Ships could be built faster, cities could grow larger, technology could advance more quickly. Captain Ji-won, now an admiral in command of the Terran Defense Fleet, oversaw the construction of humanity's first true warships. For 10 years, humans had relied on converted civilian vessels for defense. Now they were building ships designed from the ground up for combat, incorporating both human and precursor technology. We're not planning to start a war, she explained to her officers, but we need to be ready if one comes to us. The Council fears us. Fear makes people dangerous. We need to be strong enough that attacking us would be too costly to consider. The new warships were impressive, faster than anything the Council had, better armed and equipped with shields based on precursor designs. A single human warship could probably defeat 3 or 4 Council vessels. And Ji-won was building a fleet of 200. Trade began to flourish in the Expanse. Human ships carried goods between colonies, and alliance species contributed their own products. The Khalith had mining expertise. The Bryn were excellent farmers. Other species brought art, technology, or simply labor. A genuine multi-species economy was developing, independent of the Council's control. We're creating something new here, Governor Hyun said during a meeting of the Alliance Council. Not just a human empire, but a true partnership between species. The Council rules through fear and tradition. We can rule through cooperation and mutual benefit. But not everyone in the Alliance was happy. Some of the smaller species worried that humanity was growing too powerful, that this partnership would become domination. There were protests on some worlds, calls for limits on human expansion. Hyun addressed these concerns directly. We understand your fears. History is full of powerful species oppressing weaker ones. But we don't want an empire. We want partners. If you feel human influence is too strong, tell us. We'll listen. We'll adjust. Because the moment we stop listening, we become what we left behind. It was a delicate balance, and it didn't always work perfectly, but it worked well enough. The alliance continued to grow, slowly but steadily. 10 years after crossing the rim, humanity had built something remarkable. A civilization that spanned dozens of worlds, incorporated multiple species, and was advancing faster than anyone had thought possible. They had taken their exile and turned it into an opportunity. They had turned empty space into a thriving community, and they were just getting sane. Ambassador Daewon was 70 years old now, with gray hair and lines on his face earned from decades of difficult negotiations. He had retired from diplomatic service 5 years ago, content to live quietly on New Earth. But when the Council sent word that they were sending a delegation to the Expanse, President Soman had asked him to return to duty one more time. You know them better than anyone, she had said. You know how they think. We need you. So here he was, standing on the bridge of a diplomatic vessel at the edge of Terran Alliance space, waiting for the Council ships to arrive. Hana was with him, older too, but still sharp. She had never left his service, even in retirement. They're late, Hana observed, checking her chronometer. They're making a point, Daewon replied, showing us they still consider themselves our superiors. Let them. We know the truth. 20 minutes later, 3 Council ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. They were large, impressive vessels designed to intimidate. But Day One had seen human warships now. These council ships were outdated, slow, and probably less well-armed than the escort vessels humanity had sent with him. The council delegation was led by someone named Tor Malik, a member of the Quarren species. He was large, covered in dark scales, and his expression suggested he found this entire mission beneath him. 2 other counselors accompanied him, along with various aides and guards. They met in a neutral conference room on Day One's ship. The council delegation arrived with formal ceremony, expecting the humans to be impressed. Instead, they found a simple room with a table and chairs, and an old human who looked more tired than intimidated. "Ambassador Day One," Tor Malik said, his voice deep and rumbling. "We have come to inspect the Terran expanse and ensure compliance with the terms of your banishment." Day One raised an eyebrow. "Inspect? I'm afraid you misunderstand your situation. You have no authority here." Tor Malik's scales rippled, a sign of irritation. "The Council has authority everywhere. You were banished beyond the Rim. We have the right to verify that you remain there and pose no threat to Council space." "No," Day One said simply. "You banished us, which means you gave up any claim to authority over us. We are beyond your borders. What we do here is none of your concern. I dare nothing. I simply state facts." Day One leaned forward. "You are guests here, Counselor. Unwelcome guests, if I'm honest. But guests nonetheless. You have no rights in our territory beyond what we choose to grant you." The other council members looked shocked. They had expected the humans to be meek, grateful for any attention from the council. This defiance was unexpected. Hana brought up a holographic display. It showed a map of the expanse with all the human colonies, alliance territories, and trade routes clearly marked. "This is the Terran Alliance," she explained. 27 human colonies across 31 worlds, 17 allied species with their own territories, a combined population of approximately 6 billion, 12 major shipyards, 43 mining operations, and a defense fleet of 300 vessels. Tor Malik stared at the map. "This is impossible. You've only been here for 10 years. 11 years, actually," Day One corrected, "and it's not impossible. It's simply what happens when humans are free to work without restrictions. You limited us for decades, telling us we were expanding too fast, growing too quickly. You never saw what we could really do when those limits were removed. The Council will not tolerate an empire on our borders," Tor Malik said, his voice hard. "Then it's fortunate we're not on your borders," Day One replied. "The Rim is the border. We are beyond it. Far beyond it, in fact. Our furthest colonies are 3 sectors deep into the expanse. We're not expanding toward you, Counselor. We're expanding away from you." One of the other council members spoke up. "What about the species that have joined you?" "Several were under council protection. You violated our sphere of influence." "Those species chose to leave," Hana said. "We didn't force them. They saw what we were building and wanted to be part of it. If you're concerned about losing subjects, perhaps you should ask why they prefer to join us, rather than stay with you." The meeting continued for hours. The council delegation demanded access to human colonies, demanded information about military capabilities, demanded assurances that humanity wouldn't threaten council space. Day One refused everything. "We owe you nothing," he said finally. "You expelled us. You declared we were too dangerous to remain in your space, so we left. And now we're building something better out here without you. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not ours." Tor Malik stood abruptly. "The council will not forget this disrespect. There will be consequences." "Will there?" Day One stood as well, meeting the larger alien's gaze. "What consequences? Will you invade? Our fleet is probably stronger than yours. Will you impose sanctions? We don't trade with you. Will you try to turn other species against us? They're already joining us voluntarily. You have no leverage here, Counselor. No power. Just the memory of authority you once had over us, and we don't recognize that authority anymore." The council delegation left in anger. Hana watched their ships depart and let out a long breath. "That could have gone better," she said. "Could it?" Day One smiled slightly. "We said what needed to be said. They needed to understand that the old relationship is over. We're not their subjects anymore, not their subordinates. We're equals at best, and honestly, after seeing how they've stagnated while we've advanced, maybe not even equals." He was right, though neither of them felt entirely comfortable saying it. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, but they had done it by maintaining the status quo. They discouraged innovation, limited expansion, and kept everyone at roughly the same level of development. It kept the peace, but it also kept everyone weak. Humanity hadn't played by those rules. In 11 years, they had advanced further than most council species had in centuries. And now the council was afraid, which made them dangerous. Back at council headquarters, Malik delivered his report. The chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species all wanting to hear about the human situation. They are stronger than we estimated, Malik admitted. Their technology is advanced, possibly exceeding our own in some areas. They have formed a multi-species alliance, and they are completely uncooperative. Then we must act, one counselor said. Send a fleet. Remind them of the council's power. And if they win? Another asked. We could lose ships, lose prestige. And for what? They're not attacking us. They're not even near us. They're growing, a third counselor pointed out. Every year they grow stronger. If we wait too long, we might not be able to stop them at all. Vexithar, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. With respect, counselors, we've already lost. We had authority over humanity when they were in our space, subject to our laws. We gave that up when we expelled them. Now they're beyond our reach, growing unchecked. The only question is whether we accept this reality peacefully or start a war we might not win. The chamber erupted in argument. Some species wanted to fight, to remind humanity of the council's power. Others counseled caution. A few suggested trying to negotiate, to establish trade relations and mutual defense treaties. The debate raged for days, then weeks. The council was designed for stability, not quick decisions. Every species had to be consulted, every concern addressed. By the time they finally agreed on a course of action, sending a strongly worded diplomatic protest, the moment had passed. Meanwhile, in the expanse, humanity continued its work. Admiral Jiwan increased military readiness, just in case the council decided on war. Governor Hyun accelerated colony development, wanting to establish as many settlements as possible before any conflict. Engineer Wanshik pushed his teams to reverse engineer more precursor technology, knowing that any advantage could matter. President Sumin met with her closest advisors in a secure room on New Earth. They're going to come eventually, Admiral Taman said. He was very old now, almost 90, but still active in an advisory role. The council can't let us exist without trying to assert dominance. It's not in their nature. Let them come, Admiral Jiwan said. We're ready. Are we, though? Dr. Kyung asked. He was older, too, but still curious, still questioning. Ready for war against 200 species? They might be technologically behind us, but they have numbers. We have 6 billion people. They have trillions. They have trillions of civilians, Jiwan corrected. How many of those are actually willing to fight? How many of those species really care about maintaining council authority? We've already proven that some will defect to us if given the choice. Someone listened to the debate, then raised her hand for silence. We prepare for war, she said. But we work for peace. Daewon was right to refuse their demands. We can't show weakness, but we also need to show we're not a threat. We keep expanding away from council space, not toward it. We don't raid their territories or interfere with their trade. We build our alliance, strengthen our defenses, and prove that we can be good neighbors even if we're not subjects. And if they attack anyway? Hyun asked. Then we make them regret it, Soman said firmly. We've spent 11 years building something remarkable. I won't let fear of the council stop us now, but I also won't throw away what we've built by starting a war we don't need. We stay strong, stay ready, and we prepare for war, she said. But we work for peace. Daewon was right to refuse their demands. We can't show weakness, but we also need to show we're not a threat. We keep expanding away from council space, not toward it. We don't raid their territories or interfere with their trade. We build our alliance, strengthen our defenses, and prove that we can be good neighbors even if we're not subjects. And if they attack anyway? Hyun asked. Then we make them regret it, Soman said firmly. We've spent 11 years building something remarkable. I won't let fear of the council stop us now, but I also won't throw away what we've built by starting a war we don't need. We stay strong, stay ready, and the negotiations took place on a small station at the exact border between council space and the Terran expanse. Neither side would meet on the other's territory, so they had built something new. The station was simple, functional, and carefully split down the middle. Half human design, half council design meeting in the middle. Ambassador Daewon arrived first, accompanied only by Hana and a small security detail. He was 72 now, and the journey had tired him, but his mind was still sharp. This would be his last negotiation. He wanted it to matter. The council sent a delegation of 5 representatives chosen carefully to represent both hardliners and moderates. Vexthar was among them, which Daewon took as a good sign. At least one person on the other side understood the reality of the situation. They met in a conference room with a view of space on one side and the expanse on the other. A physical reminder that they stood between 2 different futures. "Let us be direct," Daewon began. "You want us to stop expanding, to accept limits, to acknowledge council authority. We will not do any of those things." One of the council delegates, a species Daewon didn't recognize, bristled. "Then why are we here?" "Because there is a difference between acknowledging your authority and respecting your borders. We will not expand into council space. We will not raid your territories or interfere with your internal affairs. We will leave you alone if you leave us alone." "The species that have left to join you," another delegate said. "They were under council protection." "They chose to leave," Hana interjected. "We did not force them. If they preferred your protection, they would have stayed. Perhaps the question you should ask is why they chose us over you." Vexithar spoke up, his voice calm. "Let us move past accusations. The humans have proven they will not be controlled. They have also proven they are not aggressors. They could have struck first when we assembled our fleet at the Rim. They did not. They could have raided our border worlds. They did not. What they want is simple: independence. At what cost to us?" a delegate demanded. "At the cost of pride, nothing more," Vexthar replied. "The council was built on the idea that we are the supreme authority in the galaxy. The humans challenge that idea by existing outside our control, but they do not threaten our survival. They threaten our ego." The room fell silent. It was rare for a council member to speak so bluntly about the organization's flaws. Daewon seized the moment. "The precursor records we released are true. You know they are. Your own historians could verify them if given the chance. The council was built on genocide and historical erasure. That does not mean the council serves no purpose now. You have maintained peace for thousands of years. You have facilitated trade, prevented wars, protected smaller species. Those achievements are real. But they are built on a lie, and that lie is now exposed." He leaned forward. "You have a choice. You can fight us, try to suppress the truth and watch the council fracture under the weight of your own crimes. Or you can accept that the galaxy is changing, acknowledge that the Terran Alliance exists as a separate entity, negotiate a mutual non-aggression treaty, and move forward. You keep your territory, we keep ours. We establish formal borders and agree to respect them. And if we refuse?" a hardliner asked. "Then we continue as we are," Daewon said simply. "You patrol your side of the Rim, we patrol ours. Eventually one side makes a mistake, ships are destroyed, and we drift into a war neither of us wants. More species leave the council, either to join us or to strike out on their own. The council weakens. The Terran Alliance grows. And in 50 years we have this conversation again, except by then, we'll be negotiating from even greater strength." The negotiations lasted 3 days. There were arguments, threats, and moments when everything nearly fell apart. But slowly, grudgingly, an agreement took shape. The Treaty of the Rim, as it came to be called, was surprisingly simple. The Council recognized the Terran Alliance as a sovereign entity with full control over its territory. The Terran Alliance agreed not to expand into Council space or encourage Council species to defect. Both sides agreed to establish formal borders, trade protocols, and diplomatic relations. There was no apology from the Council for the precursors. No admission of wrongdoing. Daewon had pushed for it, but the Council refused. Some lies were too fundamental to their identity to admit. He let it go. The truth was public now. History would judge them, even if they wouldn't judge themselves. When the treaty was signed, both sides claimed victory. The Council said they had contained the human threat and established peace. The Terran Alliance said they had won full recognition as equals. Both were right in their own way. President Isul, who had succeeded Somin 2 years earlier, addressed the alliance from New Earth. She was younger than Somin had been, barely 40, but she carried herself with confidence earned from growing up in the expanse. "Today, we have achieved what many thought impossible," she said. "We have forced the galaxy's oldest power to recognize us as equals. We did not do this through conquest or violence. We did it by proving that humanity could build something better, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for if necessary, but worth preserving through peace if possible. She paused, looking directly into the camera. 11 years ago, the council voted to banish us. They thought they were getting rid of a problem. Instead, they gave us freedom. Freedom to grow, to explore, to become what we were always meant to be. We should thank them for that. The banishment was the best thing that ever happened to us. On New Earth, celebrations broke out. The threat of war had passed. The alliance was recognized, legitimate, and secure. But some people understood that this was not an ending. It was a beginning. Admiral Taman passed away quietly in his sleep 3 days after the treaty was signed. He was 92 years old and had lived to see his plans succeed beyond even his hopes. Project Exodus, begun as a contingency plan for the worst-case scenario, had transformed into the foundation of a new civilization. His funeral was attended by thousands. Admiral Jiwan gave the eulogy, her voice steady despite her grief. He saw the future before any of us, she said. He knew that humanity needed room to grow, freedom to advance, permission to be ourselves. He prepared for exile before exile came. He built the tools we would need to survive, and more than survive, to thrive. Everything we have now we owe to his vision. He saw not the end, but the beginning. And he was right. Dr. Yunji continued her work with the precursor ruins, now with additional funding and support from both the Alliance and, surprisingly, some council species. Several council historians had quietly reached out, wanting access to the precursor records. The official council position remained one of denial, but many individuals wanted to know the truth. She discovered that the precursors had left more than just warnings. They had left blueprints, detailed instructions for technologies they hoped future species would develop. Faster-than-light communication systems, advanced medical techniques, even the beginnings of a theory for traveling between dimensions. They wanted us to succeed where they failed, Yunji explained to a group of young researchers. They knew they were dying, so they preserved everything they could. Not just their history, but their knowledge. They gave future species the tools to become powerful enough to defend themselves. One student asked, "Do you think we'll end up like them, advanced and then destroyed?" Yunji considered that. Maybe. Power always creates fear. But we have one advantage they didn't. We know their story. We know what can happen when others fear your advancement. That knowledge might save us, or it might not. But at least we'll understand what's happening if it does. Governor Hyun oversaw the expansion of New Earth into a true capital city. The population had reached 10 million and it was still growing. New buildings rose every day, each one incorporating both human and precursor design elements. The city was beautiful, a blend of Earth's architectural traditions and alien concepts that humanity had adopted and adapted. He stood on a balcony overlooking the city one evening, watching the sun set. Engineer Wonchik joined him, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "We did it," Wonchik said, handing Hyun a glass. "We actually did it." "Did what?" "Built a civilization from nothing. 11 years ago, this was an empty plain. Now look at it," Hyun smiled. "We're good at building. Always have been. Give us a problem and we'll solve it. Give us empty space and we'll fill it. It's what we do. Do you think the peace will last?" Wonchik asked. "For a while. Maybe a long while. The council is too fragmented to threaten us right now, and they know we can defend ourselves. But eventually? Maybe not. There will be other conflicts, other challenges, but we'll face them when they come." 5 years after the treaty, humanity began construction on its first embassy on a council world. Lieutenant Haru, daughter of Lieutenant Bora, who had helped dismantle Earth's defenses so long ago, was chosen as the military attaché. She was young, just 30, but she had grown up in the expanse and represented the new generation of humans who had never known council rule. The embassy was located on the council's administrative homeworld, a planet that had hosted the galactic government for thousands of years. The building was designed by both human and council architects, another symbol of the careful balance they were maintaining. At the entrance, a plaque was installed. It was made of metal salvaged from one of